Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's the 30th of January 2018, and our special guest today has been called the Godfather of Conspiracies. An ex-pilot who once worked for the CIA and who's been revealing dark secrets about a hidden deep state government and alien races and civilizations. John Lear. John Lear, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for inviting us to your incredible house here in Las Vegas. It's a shrine.
My pleasure.
First of all, how did it all begin for you? I mean, how did you start revealing all of these wild, mind-blowing secrets about what you say really is going on in the world and the deep state and the government and alien races and all of that?
You know, I didn't know anything, and in 1985, I ran a reunion of Southeast Asia pilots here in Las Vegas. And it was all the guys that flew in Southeast Asia for the CIA and different the Ravens, different groups of pilots. Anyway, I ran into a friend of mine that I'd known over in Laos. His name was Greg Wilson, and he flew A-10s for the Air Force. And when I asked, where have you been lately? And he said, well, I was stationed at Bentwaters for a while. And I said, Bentwaters? That's where that saucer supposedly landed in Christmas of 1980. He said, no, John, not supposedly. It landed. He said, I was confined to quarters, so I didn't see it, but I know guys that did. And I said, you mean there are such things as flying saucers? He said, oh, yeah. So that's what set everything off. And then I got, well, if that's real, then there's got to be other stuff, that some of the stuff I've heard is real. Mm-hmm. And between 1985 and 1987, I did a lot of reading books and checking up on UFOs, and came to find out quite a lot of information about it. But it needed to be checked, and of course in those days we didn't have computers. All we had is a telephone. And most of the contacts, most of the people that I wanted to talk to wouldn't talk on the phone. So I had to go drive to see them. And I took 6 months off from flying because I had an operation on my foot. And it enabled me to drive around and talk to these people. I took my truck and I visited Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, California, and face-to-face with these guys talked about UFOs and what they tell me. And I got so much information that when I came back, I wrote the infamous John Lear hypothesis. Uh-huh. And that set everybody off because nobody had talked about that kind of stuff. Nobody had talked about aliens being real, mm-hmm. or recovered from Roswell. And it contained so much there that I was the outcast. How could you dare say stuff like that? You know?
It was released nationally?
No, I wrote it was a 6-page hypothesis I wrote, and I sent it to a bunch of friends.
All right. So it's not published officially around the country?
No.
Okay.
Just to friends. Mm-hmm. But that was enough to set them all off. And from that, you know, one thing led to another, and I had so many people giving me information, calling me, and it just kind of snowballed into finding out what was really going on. I got trapped in the JFK conspiracy. And of course, nobody believes it's Oswald. And the fact is It was the Mossad. And the reason it was Mossad is because David Ben-Gurion, the Prime Minister of Israel, in the summer of 1963, was tired of JFK pushing for inspection of Dimona. Dimona is where the Israelis built the atomic bombs that they had in their arsenal. And the Israelis refused to let any kind of inspection, international or otherwise. So David Ben-Gurion, as prime minister, decided there was no other option except to kill Kennedy. So he gave those orders to Mossad in the summer of '63, and then resigned as prime minister. People say the CIA did it. No, they didn't. But there were some CIA guys within the CIA that greased the skids. One of them was James Jesus Angleton. James Jesus Angleton was CIA head of station in Rome when Israel was formed in 1947-48. And they sent him along with MI6, the British CIA, down to the new country Israel to form their own CIA, which became the Mossad. Somehow...
Was that funded by the United States? The Mossad?
It might as well have been. We were giving Israel $5 billion a year. We probably give them, hundreds of billions of dollars a year, not counting what they steal. So...
You're not a big fan, it seems.
Israel essentially runs the U.S. They have so many high-level personnel that have dual U.S.-Israeli passports, but whose allegiance lies with Israel. Mm-hmm. And Israel, the one that pulled off 9/11, they came up with that idea in 1979, and I believe the name of the operation was, I'm trying to think, Yemeni or something like that. But anyway, from 1979, they planned to blow up the World Trade Center.
But why do you think it has to be something that comes from Israel, not just a deep state American operation?
No. Israel wanted to use the U.S. to fight their enemies in the Middle East. Syria, Iran, Iraq, all those countries. They didn't want to do it themselves. They wanted the Americans to do it. So they had to do something that would piss off the Americans and think that it was the Muslims that did it. So the Israelis engineered all this. The Muslims, 19 hijackers flying into the buildings, and an hour after the buildings collapsed, we had Israelis saying, or coming up with the 19 hijackers with the photographs and history of all those people. It was just a setup from the beginning. So that's what they did. Now, our part in it is we have 15 orbiting direct energy weapons. Direct energy uses the molecular dissociation of matter. In other words, when they fire this weapon, it disassociates matter from itself. And in the case of the World Trade Center, there was 980,000 tons of steel and concrete. After they fired this weapon, practically none of that was left. And the reason is because it turned it all into dust that was about 80 microns in diameter. And that's what everybody saw going down the streets of the Manhattan, that big cloud of dust. That was concrete and steel reduced to dust 80 microns in diameter. That's what it did. Now the problem they had is after they fired that weapon and they started to rebuild about 4 or 5 months later, the Deutsche Bank was the first building they started to build. And when they did, as soon as they put the steel and the concrete up, it would disintegrate back down.
But what kind of weapon is that exactly?
Direct energy.
How does that function? How do we know that for sure? Because that's technology we haven't heard of.
There's a book called Where Do the Towers Go by Judy Wood. And it's one of those fantastic books that I've ever written. The Bible of 9/11.
So you believe what Dr. Judy Wood is saying, and
Absolutely.
not necessarily what architects and engineers of 9/11 Truth is saying?
Architects don't know anything.
Really?
Right.
Why do you think one thing excludes the other?
Well, there are people that believe airplanes flew into the World Trade Center. That's absolute bullshit.
But people saw it.
No possible. Those are holograms. They saw holograms. Now, I wrote a 15-page affidavit for Morgan Reynolds, who filed suit against the government in what they call a quid-am complaint. A quid-am complaint is filing if the district attorney of the local state that the accident happens will not take action, a civilian can file a quid-am complaint and sue the government himself. And it wasn't so much the government. There was, I think, 32 corporations, American corporations that were involved in 9/11. Mm-hmm. When I heard of Morgan Reynolds, actually he heard of me and called me and said, heard me on the radio, and he said, John, I think we need to get together. And I said, why is this? He said, because you know what's going on. And I'd been saying all the reasons it couldn't have been an airplane. First of all, at my highest, at the peak of my career, I couldn't have hit a target 212 feet in width, dead center, at 460 miles an hour. Impossible. Cannot be done. But for somebody who's only flown a Cessna, it's ridiculous. It cannot happen. The other thing is, between the Boeing 757 and 767, there's 6 million parts. Now, every single part in an airplane has to be authorized by the FAA, not only to manufacture it, but design it and build it. And so every single piece, including every single rivet, has an identification mark. And the reason is so when an accident happens, they can find out what caused the accident and trace it back to who built that particular part. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 6 million parts between the two airplanes that crashed in the World Trade Center 1 and 2. Not one single part was ever found. Not one. And now we're talking about 6 million pieces that, a great deal of that should have been found. The other thing is there was no engines found.
And it just exploded with the tower.
No, engines are designed to run at 1,000 degrees centigrade, and the jet fuel fire just can't get that hot. And there's so many parts in engines that you have to get to 2,500, 3,000 degrees to melt it. There's no possible way it could have disintegrated.
So as a pilot, you say it's not possible for any pilot at all to fly these planes into the towers.
Totally impossible.
Could it not have been drones that hit the towers and not holograms?
Could it have been drones? It was a hologram, and there's some people that say that the holograms could have covered the drones. There was no reason to send in drones. They had it all wired inside the building, ready so that when the hologram hit, the space weapon DEW would fire down, and these explosives in the building would go off simultaneously to make people think it was the jet fuel. But the problem is the buildings collapsed from the top down, not from the bottom up, or not all together.
But a lot of people claim that was a controlled demolition, that there were explosives inside, and you can kind of see that when you see the images.
There were certainly explosives, but that's not what caused the tower to collapse, because explosives could not reduce 980,000 tons of steel and concrete into dust 80 microns in diameter. It can't happen. There's people that hypothesize that there were nuclear bombs in the bottom. Well, first of all, there couldn't have been nuclear bombs because there was no radiation. There was no seismic signature of a nuclear bomb. If that had a nuclear bomb in the basement, it would have collapsed from the ground up, not from the top down. And when you see the explosions that happened, it's the top that's coming apart and it's working its way down. And they had controlled demolition going off simultaneously to make people think that was it.
But that's the same thing when they take down buildings in Las Vegas. Here, actually, some of the big hotels, they don't want them anymore. You can see them go down in that way.
But so there's always 13% of the structure remaining in controlled demolition. In the case of the World Trade Center, there wasn't even 1% remaining. There was just a couple of pieces of...
Would the architects and engineers who are really talking about this as well, would they agree with you on that?
I don't know. I don't talk with those guys. I'm 100%, 110% sure I'm correct on all of this.
So say that your thoughts on this are true. So you believe what Judy Wood is saying about this secret space weapon. Then please talk about that, and also talk about the holograms. How can they create such sophisticated holograms in order for people to see it? It looks real. We saw it on television, and people saw it in real life.
I don't think Judy Wood ever said anything about space-based weapons. She says it was a direct energy weapon, but she is not committing herself to where the weapon came from. I say it came from space because there's plenty of video taken by John Walson, W-A-L-S-O-N, and he has figured out how to track, using a very powerful telescope, how to track the orbiting of these weapons. And in my hallway there, I have beautiful pictures of at least 15 different orbiting direct energy weapons. And that's what did it. Now, the first time they used direct energy was in the Murat building in Oklahoma City. And they only used it at half power. So that's why only part of the building was collapsed, and that's why they saw explosives in there after it collapsed, still tied to the columns.
Oh.
It hadn't gone off. So that was the first used.
In 93, was it?
Right, 93.
Yeah.
And then when they tried when they did 9/11, was the first time they used the direct energy weapon at full power.
Where does that weapon come from? How do we have that? Where is it? You say it's from space? It's a satellite? What is it?
We didn't engineer it ourselves. We probably had E.T. helping. But there's no question that it's there. Some of the stuff I've seen would make us believe. Now, to go back to 1947, our original problem was, at the end of World War II, Germany knew they were going to lose. So they came over to the U.S. with a proposition. They knew that we were trying to build a bomb, but the only thing we couldn't fabricate, was plutonium. They were trying to build an atomic bomb themselves, but the only thing they could do was make the plutonium. They couldn't do the trigger, all the rest of the component, the atomic bomb.
The Nazis.
The Nazis. Mm-hmm. So they came to us and they said, we'll give you the plutonium you need to finish your bomb and bomb Japan. All we ask is at the end of the war, you let 4,000 Nazis in your country paperwork free. They get to stay there forever. And so we agreed to that, and it was called Project Paperclip. It was managed by John Foster Dulles, who was the Secretary of State, Allen Dulles, his brother who ran the CIA, and Eleanor Dulles, their sister, who was head of the Berlin desk, U.S. Berlin desk in Berlin. And between them, between the three of them, they led in 4,000 Nazis who immediately infiltrated the United States and began a takeover. The first thing they did is they took over NACA, N-A-C-A, and made it NASA. They took over that hook, line, and sinker, the whole thing. And then they took over Bell Helicopter. That's why we had the Viennese Wars, was merely to sell Bell Helicopters to get more money for the Nazi infiltration. So they started to take over and completed it probably in the 60s. They were the ones that decided to fake the moon landings. Now, the moon landings had to be faked because there's no possible way that we could get through the Van Allen belt. General Van Allen sent 3 rockets up in 1959, strictly to measure the radiation. One of them didn't work, but the other two returned and showed that there was massive radiation around the Earth. Now, E.T. put that radiation there for one specific reason, and that was to keep Earth people from going anywhere in space until they were sufficiently educated and knew how to conduct themselves in space without trying to bomb everybody on the outside. They didn't want them on Mars. They didn't want anywhere.
So you're saying that aliens or ETs put that Van Allen belt around the Earth?
Absolutely, positively.
What kind of evidence or proof or what led you to believe that is so?
Well, we didn't do it, so it had to be somebody else.
It couldn't be a natural thing, a natural radiation belt.
No. This was highly sophisticated. It went from 500 miles to 25,000 miles. And there's two levels. Both of them are extremely radioactive, so that if we made through one, we couldn't make it through the other. If we made it through the other, we'd be dead. So that's the way that they engineered the radiation belt. And most of the top echelon in NASA knew about it. They knew they were going to have to fake
And who told you about these things?
I've read so many books. The library here is full of just books that talk about this. The top row there is all
you have books, a lot of stuff here.
How NASA was conducted, what they did. We have interviews with top NASA personnel. They would be asked, what did you fake? Did you fake the moon landings? And they said, we faked everything. Nothing was real.
But that's not what the world population is led to believe,
no,
at least.
They're not supposed to know what's going on.
But still, you say they talked about it publicly?
Yeah, that's on the internet.
And can we trust that those people are not spreading disinformation?
Well, the way it happened is when Kennedy proposed that we land on the moon by the end of the decade.
In the 50s.
In the 50s. Well, he made the speech in 1960.
Right.
NASA, who was controlled by the Nazis, thought this was a great opportunity to make some money because they needed to put the direct energy weapons in space, and they needed money. So they faked the Apollo program, they faked Gemini, they faked Mercury, in order to get the $40 billion that they needed. And they used that $40 billion to make the direct energy weapons I'm talking to you about. There was a couple of flies in the ointment. One of them was an astronaut named Gus Grissom. This guy was fantastic. He was an engineer. He was the brightest one, and he was supposed to be the first guy on the moon. But on January 27th, 1967, they were doing Apollo 1 test. And what it was, they sealed them in the capsule, and they were doing a plugs out test, which means there was no connection. It was all for real, except they weren't going to take off. So after they closed the door, they're in a 100% oxygen environment. The cockpit had been wired with stuff that was flammable. And a couple of minutes after the door was closed, at 6:31 local, this little thing they had in the cockpit set off a spark, which ignited the atmosphere and all the flammable stuff in there and killed 4 of them: Grissom, Chaffee, White, and the secret astronaut. Now, the reason the secret astronaut there was because they always flew with somebody who could help them sort out all of the problems they were having. And one of them was the head of the Apollo program, and he was the one that was in there helping them. Now, people say, well, you can't fit 4 people in the cockpit. Well, yes, you can, because you have the 3 astronauts sitting here, 1, 2, 3, and the 4th guy would lay down with his head on the instrument panel and his feet into the bay where they were going to put the moon rocks.
Oh.
And they sorted out those problems all the time. But on this day, he had to be in Houston. So it was so secret that they were having a fourth person to help, that they took one of the secret astronauts. Now, today we have 1,000 secret astronauts. They launch all the time out of Kwajalein Island, which is the Ronald Reagan ballistic missile test facility. And they launch 2 or 3 rockets a week. The public is told that we have to beg the Russians to get a ride to the ISS, because we don't have anything. We don't have the shuttle anymore. Where in Kwajalein, we're launching 2 or 3 shuttles a day for all the stuff we have.
And do we know that
orbiting.
for sure?
Absolutely, positively. And of course, it's totally secret. We also use Wake Island. It's possible to use Johnston Island. But this operation is so big that it's fantastic. Anyway, that's what they needed the $40 billion for, in addition to the black budget. In addition, they had to control the world illegal drug market. And it used to be the Golden Triangle, used to be Burma, Laos, and Thailand, up in that corner where all the drugs are coming from. Today it's Afghanistan. Now, one of the reasons that we invaded Afghanistan was that the Taliban was trying to shut down the opium farming. They had got it to a point where Afghanistan was only producing 5% of the world's illegal drug. We went in there because the Taliban was trying to shut the operation down, took over, and within 5 years, Afghanistan was putting out 97% of the world's illegal drugs. And that was because it was us. We were doing the farming, we set it up, we knew where it had to go, and we needed the money. We knew how to get it out of Afghanistan. We knew, how to transport it, how to make it. I've talked to B-1 pilots, specifically one who said, when I was telling the story, he says, well, that explains that. I said, explains what? He said, well, and I told him that the main area for growing opium was in the Hindu Kush. And the Hindu Kush is the northeast part of Afghanistan that extends up to the northeast. It's perfect. It's mountainous. The temperature is right. The altitude is right. We have hundreds of thousands of acres of opium growing there. But it's a no-fly area for anybody that's flying a B-1 because they don't want them bombing those because that's our stuff. We don't want them bombing our opium fields.
So the U.S. did not invade Afghanistan because of what happened?
There was no reason to suspect that Muslim had anything to do with 9/11. The stories about Osama bin Laden are just incredibly stupid that a guy in a cave could pull off that kind of an operation. Not only that they could fly, but they could keep the F-15s grounded in the Northeast Corridor from going after those airliners. There's just so much information.
Exactly.
We went in there because we wanted to take over the opium drug.
So why is the U.S. government interested in taking over the opium trade and what is going on there with drugs?
For the money. We need the money, and we need it for black projects, and we need a lot of it. So that's why the U.S. has always controlled the illegal drug market.
To sell them to the population?
Yeah, to sell them to the drug. In Vietnam, it was so sophisticated, they were using military casualties, people that had been killed, and loading their body bags with heroin and sending them back. That's how they got it through customs. But there's new ways of doing it, and Afghanistan is one of the prime areas where we produce the opium drug. Now, as far as transporting it, a couple thousand years ago, Afghanistan was a lushly fertile farmland, and the reason it was so lush is they were able to irrigate it with a lot of water. And the way they did that is they built tunnels under Afghanistan that run the length and the breadth, and they're 12 feet in diameter, and they're all over the place. The public isn't told that, but I know that because James Michener wrote a book in 1956 or in the 60s called Caravans. It was about his time spending with the State Department in Afghanistan, in Kabul.
They were digging tunnels?
No, they were already there. They were dug 2,000 years ago.
Oh.
But his associates, his friends there in Kabul, took him in and showed him those tunnels. So that's how we get Afghanistan, or that's how we get the drugs from one end of the country to the other.
But still talking about 9/11, you talked about these holograms. You believe that the planes that went into the towers were holograms. Can you talk about that technology?
That technology was available to us in 1960. We were going to use that technology against Cuba by presenting a hologram of Jesus Christ. And it was going to be out in the harbor and standing up, and Jesus was going to tell them whatever they're going to do. That was the first time we were going to use it.
And they did that with the Virgin Mary, didn't they?
Yeah.
Projected a hologram there in Cuba.
They keep developing it until today, almost nothing is real. They project all those holograms. All of our secret air bases, or our secret airplanes, are hidden by holograms. And the way they do it is they have transmitters on the mountainsides around a particular airport, aimed down at the airport, or whatever they want to call, whatever they want.
The military bases?
All the military bases, yeah, the secret ones. And they transmit a picture of whatever's there. For instance, if a airport is in a desert, what they do is they transmit a picture of a desert, but there's nothing there. If it's near a forested area, they make it look like a forest. Now, when a pilot has to land at one of those places, he's vectored by radar to within 200 feet of landing, and they turn the transmitters off, and it opens up to show the runway that they land, and then after he lands, they press the button and it closes back up.
That is remarkable. That is incredible. How do we know about this kind of technology? How do you know about it?
There's so many ways. I couldn't even count all the instances of where I've heard about and learned about it. But one of them was a guy named Bergwin, Norman Bergwin. He was very, very intelligent. He worked for all the major aerospace companies. I'm not sure he's still alive, but he wrote the book Ringmakers of Saturn. Ringmakers of Saturn was when he retired in 1986. He got a hold of some of the Voyager pictures when we sent Voyager around Saturn, and he was able to look at them in the privacy of his own home without any help. And he found, the book is over there. I have 2 copies. It sold for $30. These days it's selling for $3,500 a book.
It's a very expensive and rare book today, isn't it?
Yeah. So he showed where in the rings of Saturn there's vehicles that are 30,000 miles in diameter, or 30,000 miles long and 2,400 miles in diameter. And those are the ships that he showed, and that's the stuff that we know about Saturn. Every picture we see is false. We never see anything true things.
So the way we see Saturn depicted is not real?
Not that NASA shows us. The only thing that's real that we see is the rings around Saturn.
Those are real?
Right.
In what way does Saturn have significance and play a part in our solar system? We often hear that Saturn plays a very important role also for the elite.
No, not the elite. We're all here on Earth for one reason, and that's because in our last life, and all of us, you, me, him, have lived hundreds of lives before this life, 200-300 lives. And we're here on Earth because the last life that we lived, we screwed up. We did something wrong. And we're down here on the prison planet Earth to learn how to live with integrity, without envy, without hate, without greed, and to spend each and every day expressing our love to our family members. That's all we're here to do. We're not here to make money. We're not here to chase women. We're not here to big corporations. This is all we have to do, and that's all we have to do.
So why is the other stuff happening? Chasing women, money, fame, jobs, and all of that?
Those are all tests to see how we handle different situations.
And I want to cover that with you as well. But to go back to you said that there's a connection between Saturn, and you say the book, The Ringmakers of Saturn, to what we have, holographic technology that can create life-like holograms that people see and think is real. How real does it look? I mean, those planes that went into the two towers at 9/11 looked real.
Yeah, I was telling you about Norm Bergman. I was telling you about his qualifications. And in 2005, I was going to speak at a UFO conference in San Jose. And I drove there from Las Vegas. And one of the things I did was make an appointment with Norman to talk to him. We developed a friendship that, and I don't know whether he's still alive, we talked a lot about different things. When I was there in 2005, I mentioned my theory about the airplanes being holograms. He says, John, you're right, and I'll tell you why. He said, I was driving down to the electronic base there in south of San Francisco. I'm trying to remember what they call it. He said, I was going to work, and I'm on the highway going down, 8:30 in the morning, and he said, I got something caught my eye, and I looked over, and here's a 747, 200 feet above the ground, just sitting there. He said, I looked at it, he said, I was absolutely astounded. It was just as real. There's no reason the 747 should be there because San Francisco is, 15, 20 miles behind me. This isn't the corridor for airplanes, and there shouldn't be one at 200 feet anyway. But he said, John, it was just as real as if it was there, and about 30 seconds later, it went out. There was no more.
It disappeared.
Disappeared. So that's why Norman said, John, I think you're right, those were holograms. We have ways of projecting holograms with speed, with noise, with every kind of thing to make you think it was real.
Is that a kind of technology that would have been developed by Nikola Tesla, for example?
Yeah. Tesla was more interested in the death ray than holograms. But holograms, like I say, it was real in the 60s and has only increased in quality and the different ways they can use it.
Some scientists today are claiming more and more that we're actually living in a holographic universe and in a projection that is holographic, just very sophisticated. That you and I and everything around us here, and you have a lot of stuff, is actually holographic in nature because we are vibrating on a certain frequency that makes it all three-dimensional.
No, we're real. We live in 3D land. 3D is, we're aware of 3 dimensions. But there's actually an infinite number of dimensions. And the next one, the 4th dimension, is what we call heaven. Now,
heaven?
It's hard for me to describe how wonderful it is in the 4th dimension because number 1, I've never been there. Number 2, there's not, well, I have been there.
You have been
actually, there. All of us have been there. Actually, it's a fantastic place, and when we pass away here, we're instantly taken to the lobby of heaven, and it's hard to describe how fantastic it is. When Steve Jobs died 2 years ago, his whole family was around him, and he only had like a minute to live. They knew that because of his heartbeat and blood pressure and everything, he was just about to expire. About 15 seconds before he totally expired, he went, "Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow." And what he
Really?
was seeing was the lobby there of where you go after you die. Now,
The tunnel of light?
no, it's a place. It's like the lobby.
The white light, it's referred as too.
Maybe.
And you see a live review pass before your eyes
well,
with everything that happened in your life.
Yeah, well, some of that's true. But what Steve saw was the lobby. He didn't go, oh, wow, for a white light. He saw something, and what he saw was a lobby. Now, when you die, you're met by whoever you believe in. If you believe in God or believe in Jesus, or if you're Muslim and believe in Allah, or whoever you believe in meets you there. And, for instance, now I will be met by the Great Pumpkin, because I believe the Great Pumpkin is gonna meet me there.
That's going to be an experience.
They take you to meet many of the friends and associates you knew in your previous lives. And it's really a joyful experience. To spend about 45 minutes meeting and talking with everybody, renewing old acquaintances.
45 minutes?
Yeah. And then you're taken into what they call life review. And they take you into this room where you're shown your life in three-dimensional HD TV, color, sound, everything that happened in your life. And they show you all the wonderful things you did and how you were so gracious to people and the wonderful things you did for people.
So everything must have been registered here.
Everything's recorded.
Because it's holographic? Because it is
because
projection?
they record it.
They record it?
Yeah.
Like a film. So
like
it is like it. So we are in a film, like The Matrix.
Yes. So then they show you all the nasty little things you did, things that you didn't know anybody knew. And there it is, three-dimensional color TV, you performing these awful things, whatever you did. Now, after you see both sides of the equation, the good things you did and the bad things, somebody makes a decision, and I don't know who that is, whether you have to go down back to Earth and live another life, learning how to live with integrity, without envy, hate, or greed, and expressing your love to your family each and every day. Or if you pass the test and you get to stay there in heaven. Now, if you stay there in heaven, it's a fantastic place. You have everything you want. It's really great. But you can go further. You can go up to the fifth dimension. You can go up to sixth dimension. Whatever you want to do, it's yours to do.
It's a conscious decision that you can make yourself.
No, they make the decision on whether you go back to
Who are
Earth.
they?
Well, I'd like to know who they are. Whether you go back to Earth or whether you stay in the fourth dimension, which is heaven. Now, people say heaven. If they would exponentially increase their view of heaven by 1,000, that wouldn't even approach how wonderful heaven is. It's undescribable. But people like staying there, and that's what we earn if we learn how to live with integrity, without envy, hate, or greed, and express our love to our family.
But that's the religious beliefs, right, around the world.
It's not. It's a true belief. It's not religion. There is no God as such. There's advisors that are watching us all the time, 24/7. When we pray, we're talking to, it might be family, it might be somebody else, but we're really talking to people, not God, but it is people that are watching our whole life and help us go through life.
But still somebody is superior and making decisions for us, whether we can stay there or go back.
Not somebody, something.
Not God.
What? No,
not God.
The Bible is an allegorical piece of work. Nobody existed. Mary Magdalene did not exist. Jesus did not exist. Peter did not exist. All that stuff is stories made up to teach us certain things about life and how we should do.
That's God in a Christian organized way you're talking about. But what about God as a kind of a force?
It can be a force.
Call it something else.
Yeah, call it whatever you want.
The source?
I don't know. I don't like the word, because when you pray, you're not praying to someone or something or a source. You're praying to your advisors around you. And they answer each and every request that you pray for, not always in the way that you want, but they do answer it. They hear you.
So there are new theories out, and a lot of people started to talk about this. People who have had near-death experiences, people who actually had out-of-body experiences, declared dead and then went back into the body, who also atheists and religious people, you say, whether they're Muslims, Christians, whatever, they all basically more or less saw the same thing, went to this white light, feeling of bliss, meeting relatives, looking their best.
Right.
And so, new ideas, theories are that the white light is also an illusionary dimension created in this fourth dimension, a constructed deception created by these interdimensional beings, which many refer to as the archons, which the Muslims call the jinn, who are maybe demons or whatever label you want to put on it, but not physical. In order for them to create like a karma wheel, a reincarnation recycling factory, in order for these souls to go back into the timeline on Earth, and because we are soul food to them, it's like a soul trap. What are your thoughts on that theory?
We're not soul food. We have our souls. What we try to do is educate our souls in the different lifetimes that we have. It's all about making your soul better, learning how to live with integrity, learning how to live without envy, hate, or greed. It's educating your soul. That's nobody that's going to eat the soul or anything. That's all BS. The soul is real. It belongs to you. It's there forever. You don't have to pray for it. You don't have to beg for it. You don't have to pay money to a church to be sure that your soul will be kept everlasting. It's everlasting already.
So let's say the soul is real and we feel it and it's there. So when we go out of the body, we are more enlightened than we are now in the three-dimensional world because we don't know everything.
It's not so much enlightened, but we know everything. It all becomes absolutely perfectly clear what's going on, but unfortunately, we're not allowed to remember it. And if we come back to Earth, we don't remember any of that stuff.
Couldn't that be a trap?
We've got to improve the soul, and you got two outcomes. Either you come back to Earth and work on it, or it's already good enough that you can stay up there in the fourth dimension.
So the soul is not complete and fully aware when we're not in the three-dimensional world.
It has to be educated. We're learning. They try and help us. We have advisors that are around here all the time. If you want something, they'll listen to your idea, and if they feel like you should have it, they'll give it to you. Or they may come up with another plan to give you something in relation to your request.
Mm-hmm. Your father was William Lear, who invented the Lear jet in the 1950s. And you've been flying since then. You became a pilot and you flew commercial airplanes for 35 years before you retired. But supposedly also you worked as a pilot for the CIA for a time. Can you talk about that experience? Is that true? Did you work for the CIA?
Yeah, I didn't know I was working for the CIA. I got a job with World Aviation in Florida, ferrying airplanes to Vietnam. And only, after I made a couple trips, I was informed who we were working for. I should have known it immediately because we were giving field grade rank. Everywhere we went, there was a path cleared. Nobody gave us any problems. I wore my hair extra long. Nobody had told me to get a haircut. And we also landed we delivered the airplanes in Nha Trang, which had a name like CIA-ville or something like that, but it was totally CIA there. And when we landed, they would detank the airplane, take the tanks out, put the co-pilot seat back in, and get it all ready for forward air control.
What was your purpose at that time? What did they want you to do for the CIA?
I was hired as a pilot. Now, a lot of people say, oh man, what'd you find out? Nothing. They don't tell pilots anything. You go to work and you fly from A to B. Your expertise is flying airplanes, not trying to figure out what's going on. In 1980, it would have been, I think 78 or 80, I got a phone call from a guy, and he said, and at the time I was working for Nevada Airlines, he says, he had the thick German accent, we're looking for a 707 captain, would you be available? And I said, well, what do you pay? And he said, I think it was $100 an hour. Those times that was big money. And I said, yes. He said, okay, well, go to Frankfurt, go to the International Hotel at Frankfurt, and I'll call you there. So, and I said, well, what about where are you going to buy a ticket? And he said, I'll have the cash here when you get here to pay for your trip. So I called around, found out this guy was on the level. His name was Hank Wharton. He was one of the premier gun runners for the State Department. So get to Frankfurt and check into the hotel, and there's a note that says, tomorrow morning, go to the Lufthansa counter at 10 o'clock. There'll be a prepaid ticket there to take you to Budapest. When you get to Budapest, you'll be met by somebody who will take you to the International Hotel. I think it was the Hilton. So the next morning, go down there. It just happened that there was 8 other guys that I'd flown with that I didn't know what they were doing, but now they were working with me. There was 9 of us, and the 707s had 3 people in each crew. So I figured there was going to be 3 airplanes. Anyway, when I saw them there, I said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, well, you don't think you're going to get in on a deal like this without us, do you? I said, well, I guess not. So we all go to Budapest. As you know, citizens are not allowed to travel in Budapest, but there was obviously some CIA guys standing behind the Immigration and Customs Center that walked us through. We go through there, we get a ride to the International Hotel. Everybody checks in, and about an hour after we check in, we get a phone call and said, at 9:30 tonight, go to room such and such. Okay, so 9:30 tonight, we go to room such and such, and there's 9 of us all sitting around, and this guy, Hank Wharton, comes in. He says, welcome to Budapest. As you know, the River Danube runs through Buda and Pest. Buda's on the north side of the river, Pest is on the south. And as he's carrying on this travelogue, he's got a piece of paper with a bunch of stuff written on it. And he hands it, as he's giving the travelogue, he hands it to a guy, points to him to read it. So he's continuing on the travelogue. This guy finishes, he takes you, as you read it. And it was rules and regulations. Don't change money on the black market. Don't tell anybody why you're here. If they ask, tell them you're taking farm equipment to Africa, but don't ask any other questions, the whole thing. I have a copy there in that logbook you see in my hallway, the big leather one that says soliloquy. I kept that piece of paper. So at the end, when everybody, all 9 people have read this thing, he says, okay, now we're going to go out and we're going to have a really nice dinner on me. And first we're going to take you to the chain bridge and we're going to go out to the middle. So we all file downstairs, we walk out, and the chain bridge is like a couple of blocks from where we were. And you've seen the picture that's a picture of the chain bridge on the wall. We go to the center, there's nobody out there. He says, okay, now here's what we're doing. We're taking arms to Somalia, to Mogadishu. You guys are going to stop in Jeddah to get refueling. All the fuel is prepaid. You have the clearances for all the countries down to Jeddah and beyond. And when you get to Mogadishu, they'll unload the airplane. You'll have a place to stay for a couple hours, then get back in the airplane and come back here.
Weapons, then?
Yeah, weapons, ammunition, everything. The Russians had built a deep water port on the north side of Somalia. Now, the name of the game in the Middle East is real estate on the Red Sea. And that's because all the oil-producing countries are on the north side of the Red Sea. And the only 2 ways out is through the Straits of Hormuz to the north or the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden to the south. Now, they have prepared, just in case the Persian Gulf gets cut off, the Straits of Hormuz gets cut off, they have a huge city on the southwestern side of Saudi Arabia called Yanbu. And they have giant pipelines of oil that can come from the oil-producing companies. That's just in case. But the name of the game is try and get real estate on the Red Sea, because if the Straits of Hormuz get cut off, you're going to want to have control. You want to control of at least part of the Red Sea. Now, on the north side, you have Yemen, which is communist, and
Communist?
they're not the good guys. Well, communist. That I'm talking about 1977. And so they had control of that. They also had control on the south side of the Gulf of Aden, with Russia had been supplying arms and ammunition to Somalia for years, and they built a deep water port called Berbera. And unfortunately, the Russians in 1977 made a mistake of supporting the Ethiopian rebels to the north of them, which was really a bad mistake, because the Somalians hate those guys and they kicked the Russians out. When they kicked the Russians out, we had a chance not only to get that deep water port of Berbera, which is exactly what we needed, but control that part of the real estate in the Red Sea to assure that if the oil ever had to come down through Yanbu, that we would have control of the Gulf of Aden to get the oil out. So a massive operation was made to ingratiate ourselves to the Somalian leadership by giving them arms and ammunition and all kinds of other stuff. The problem was they had been traditionally backed by East Bloc countries, which meant that the diameter of the guns was such that American ammunition wouldn't fit in. So we had to buy East Bloc ammunition, and we bought it in Hungary, and who knows where they got it, and it would be sent all to Hungary, and our 707s would transport it down to Mogadishu.
And that was during the Cold War, obviously,
Right.
still. And you were sworn to secrecy by... No?
Nobody swore to secrecy.
So you were just doing it, and you knew
Out of the
that
goodness
you were...
of my heart.
And you were not like smuggling weapons, you were just
This was
flying
for the
them.
State Department. This
Yes.
is what they wanted, and this is what we did.
And you talked publicly about it to
No.
people, friends, and...
But we weren't told not to talk about it.
Really?
I posted on Facebook, and I'll show you, I think I have one here, in the Saudi Gazette. It said, "Mystery jet flies arms to Somalia." And so we took, on the wall there, I have a picture of the mystery crew, because after that headline came out, we called ourselves the Mystery Crew, and we had a picture taken in downtown Budapest of the 9 of us standing there, and I've got Mystery Crew there, and I posted that on Facebook. The International Herald Tribune also had a story, and we got a couple of copies of that. But anyway, there was a lot of publicity about what we were doing. It wasn't much of a secret anymore.
So it wasn't a secret. So why was it CIA? Why was it a CIA operation, you think?
The CIA is the run that all our secret operations.
Have you in any way in later years been involved with the CIA, or been contacted, been briefed, or...
Other than the reunions, which I go to very rarely now, I don't see any of those personnel anymore.
Which reunions? The CIA or the...
Yeah, pilots or CIA. Everybody who's a pilot's worked for the CIA at one time or another. And all the reunions, the guys you knew in Southeast Asia or, wherever you fly. And I flew in the Middle East. I flew in Africa. I flew all over, so I knew a lot of people. And in the reunions, it's nice to see them again.
So do you say that most people who fly commercial airlines as pilots are involved in the CIA at one point or the other?
No. These days, there's so many of our generation. I'm 75, haven't been flying for 20 years. There's new guys that absolutely know nothing. And some of the guys that I fly with and hear about, they'll be flying like over along the corridor that goes up the eastern side of Vietnam, and they'll ask the co-pilot, they'll say, "That's Vietnam out there." And the co-pilot says, "What? You're kidding? We're near Vietnam?" They have no idea what's going on. Pilots these days haven't the faintest idea, what's going on. And they don't know where they are. They know how to fly the airplane.
But in your days, people that were pilots were involved in the CIA at one point or the other.
We knew a lot. We did a lot. As far as finding anything out, you find nothing out in the CIA. You're not briefed on anything. You're not told anything. You fly from A to B. Usually you don't know what's in the back. And I had a chance to really learn some stuff. I got shot down in Laos. I was in a Twin Otter. I was the co-pilot. The captain flew too close to a place we were delivering ammo to, and they shot out the right engine. So we're going to try and find a safe place to land. And I got on the microphone, and what had happened, they shot out the engine and hit the strut where the fuel was going up, and the fuel was pouring out into the back of the airplane, and because of the flow, it was coming back around and into the big cargo doors that, there were no cargoes, the big opening where we pushed the ammo out. And it was filling the airplane full of fuel. You could hardly believe there was so much atomized fuel there. So I was going to pick up the microphone and call Cricket. Cricket is the airplane that flies over Southeast Asia and transmits all the stuff where guys are doing. If you need help, you call Cricket, and they'll send somebody. And every once in a while, there'll be a warning. It'll go, "This is Cricket on guard with an airstrike warning to all aircraft. Avoid the area." Da, da, da. Anyway, that's Cricket. And then there was a nighttime name, and I can't remember. But anyway, I was going to call Cricket, and I thought, if I press that mic button and there's a spark, we're going to go completely up. But I had to tell them that we'd been hit. We were trying to get into safe territory. So I kind of hovered it like this and finally got the courage to press the mic button and said, and since I was still there, not blown up, I said, Papa Hotel Victor, we just had the engine shot out. We're trying to get to Lima 69. Our altitude is whatever. Anyway, so I got that message off, and the captain got us to an airport where it was friendly. We landed, everything was okay. But that night, I had had a few vodka tonics just to calm my nerves, but there was a guy in where we were staying in this little hostel type place, a little cabin, that knew everything about CIA, and he was telling the pilot all these really neat secrets while I was asleep, having had too many vodka tonics. I missed that one. That was a really poor move on my part. But that was, I could have found out a lot of stuff, but I didn't.
But if you were involved in a CIA operation like you told us, and you've been saying publicly for a long time, how can it be that you can actually say that in public and talk about it without any fear of being stopped in any kind of way? Have you ever had any problems with this?
Nobody's ever said anything to me. I just wrote on a post that I'm putting out today, I'm the only one. I used to carry 3 cameras. One, a Nikon with black and white film, another Nikon with color film, and a Bella House Super 8 millimeter camera. Mm-hmm. And I've got fabulous film that nobody else got. I've got 1,000 or 950 feet flying in Laos, all the action, everything going on. I've got 950 feet of flying in Cambodia, living there and flying there. I have 450 feet of flying the Pacific for 4 years, taking airplanes back and forth. I've got a lot of that stuff, and unfortunately it's on Super 8 film, and I'm hoping before I croak that I can get it transferred to DVD so I can send some of this to my friends, and I'd like to post some of it on YouTube.
Are there anything revealed that would be a threat to national security, as they call it?
Only in, we're talking about 40 years ago, only that when I lived in Cambodia, we used to look up and see squadrons of B-52s flying over when we weren't supposed to be in Cambodia. That's about the only thing that it shows.
Have you ever been involved in the MJ-12?
Yeah.
Yes.
What happened is MJ-12, whose headquarters is S4 up at Groom Lake, wanted to get some information out. And the MJ personnel, the original 12, have all passed away. So they get different people into these positions of MJ 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and taken over. It's degraded, so it's almost political now instead of like it was when Truman originally formed the MJ-12. It turns out that MJ-1, the head of MJ-12, is a guy named Admiral Mike McClellan. He wanted to get some of the information out because he didn't want to. He thought that some of this information should be out in the public. We don't need to keep all this secrecy. So he decided trying to figure out a way to get it to the public. So he knew that I was a blabbermouth and I would tell anything I knew. They investigated Bob Lazar and they knew that he was a genius, but that he had a background such that they could instantly discredit him. They removed all his records from MIT, from Caltech, so he couldn't prove anything. He'd go back to Caltech, no, I don't see any records here. Well, I was here. Well, no, you weren't. And he also, up in Reno at one time, he ran a cat house there. I forget what the name of the Honeysuckle Ranch it was. So they chose him because not only could he probably help them because he was so smart, and as a matter of fact, he's the one that named an Unpennium 115. He's the one that told them what that was, and they didn't know when he went there. They didn't know what it was. He was the one that told them that's element 115, and then told them why and how he'd figured it out. But they decided to pick on Bob to go up there to work at S4. Because they knew that Bob would tell me instantly, and that I would blab the whole thing. And that was their modus operandi, was to get the information out and gauge what it did to the public, how they accepted it, and then pull back and say, oh, no, it was all a mistake. Bob Lazar is a fraud. He never worked here. He doesn't have any credentials like that. And they could back away and get out of it. So that was what Mike McClellan, Admiral Mike McClellan, came up with, and that's the way they played it. That's why I'm alive today, because Mike McClellan is keeping me alive. When he dies, I'm going to be gone.
So Bob Lazar says that is how it happened, that he was told these things and then he gave this information to you and then you...
He didn't know McClellan engineered this stuff. He just knew that he got a job up there because in the summer of '88, we were talking, a friend, Gene Huff, and I were talking about UFOs, and Bob would say, you know, you guys ought to go see a psychiatrist because there's no such thing. He said, I worked in Los Alamos National Laboratories. I knew everything that was going on. I was a senior physicist there, and I heard nothing about UFOs. So over the next 5 months, that was like in June of '88, over the next 5 months, there was 3 things that we proved to Bob that we may know more than he did about UFOs. And one was the existence of a secret postal stop called Huawei-2, and that was where they kept one of the EBEs.
You must explain to the audience what an EBE is.
Extraterrestrial biological entity.
That's an alien, right. What they call an EBE.
The other thing was the Project Excalibur, which was a rocket that was designed to go into the Earth 1,000 feet and then explode. And we knew about that. And I forget what the third thing was, but Bob called his friends back in Los Alamos to find if anything was like that was real, and they said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. And so he thought, well, maybe these guys know what they're talking about. Also, we showed him the Billy Myers tapes, and of course, worldwide, he's labeled a fraud, and he wasn't. That was real stuff. But that was one of the government's most important projects, was to discredit Billy Myers because the pictures were so great, so clear, the movies were so great, so clear, and they couldn't afford to have that happen. They had to discredit Billy Myers. And today, I know good friends that say, oh no, Billy Myers is a fraud. No, he wasn't. He was the real thing.
And can people find information about Billy Myers and see his photographs?
They can see his photographs, they can see his movies, and all they'll hear about is how it was faked. There's so many people. I was thrown off. There's a website called Above Top Secret, and when I got on Above Top Secret, I was so popular there. I think I was number 8 or 9 in the popularity of the whole crowd there. But they started talking about Billy Myers, and I said it was real, and they, like hundreds of thousands of people, oh, you idiot, how could you believe anything like that? And I finally left because I didn't want to put up with that, and I was going to be a part of a website that was going to say that Billy Myers was a fraud. Mm-hmm. So I left ATS and went to different places, and I haven't been back other than I hooked up with Facebook by accident 3 or 4 months ago, and it's a nice place to work. And I'm posting most of those stories because I have a great following, fan following. If I can just keep my feet on the ground, because I get so many accolades all day long, it'll be able to go off and easy to go into outer space and believe, hey, I must be really something here. But I try and keep my feet on the ground and not believe all that stuff, but to thank people for being so nice.
Mm-hmm. So what was your father, William Lear, was he in any way involved in the deep state, or was he in the know in some kind of way?
Yeah. In 1952, Lear Incorporated was chosen by the Pentagon to investigate anti-gravity. Now, it's not called anti-gravity. I think they called it field investigations. But he was the top company. And everybody else came under him. That was in 1952. In 1953, he made a trip to Bogota, and when the reporters, when he arrived, there was a lot of reporters there, and all they wanted to know about was UFOs. Now, since he had been briefed, and since he had this job with the Pentagon of investigating field relationships, he was told, don't say anything about UFOs. But for some reason, apparently, he thought it didn't apply to him, and he gave he gave an interview to all the newspapers that Bill Lear thinks that, Bill Lear's that, and he got kicked out of the program. Now, he was president and chairman of the board of Lear Inc., but he was still not allowed in the field relationship program, no matter what he was. If he lost his clearance, he might as well, forget it. And so he remained on as president chairman of the board until he sold Lear Inc. to Siegler in 1959 and became Lear Siegler. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday, a video surfaced on the web called the Bonson Lab video. Now, I'd seen 2 or 3 minute segments of this thing, but never the whole thing. And it was a home movie of my dad, T. Townsend Brown, and Agnew Bonson working on field relationships between 1958 and 1960. It was so real, and this home movie, it brought tears to my eyes because it was guys actually doing something.
They were engineers?
Yeah, and my dad working with T. Townsend Brown and Agnew Bonson is incredible. And I saw this thing yesterday. It's 22 minutes long, and it's fantastic. Like I say, it brought tears to my eyes because of the things that they're working on. And at one point, there's they have a bottle of champagne, and they're celebrating. And see, there's no sound to it. There's the music, but no voice. And they're pouring champagne, and obviously they've discovered something really, really great. And throughout this whole 22-minute segment, they show the calendar and the dates, and sometimes they circle a date, and sometimes they put a letter there like A or something like that. And, none of us were there, and we don't have anybody that's alive that was there, so don't know what they're doing. But it's obviously they were so important. The work they were doing was so important, they were keeping track of it.
So your father knew about UFOs and the existence of UFOs and aliens even?
Yeah, he knew everything. In 1953, when he lost his clearance, he was probably told, Bill, you lost your clearance. Now, we don't want you to say anything from now on about UFOs. If you do, we're going to kill Moya, his wife. We're going to kill your daughters and your sons. We're going to kill your dog. We're going to kill your cat. We're going to kill your grandparents. We're going to kill everybody you know if you mention anything about UFOs. So he was pretty quiet for the rest of his life. I never heard him say that much.
So he never spoke to you about it? That's not where you got it from?
No.
But how do you know that he knew these things and were told that?
My mom told me.
So he did say it. He did say it to your mom.
Privately,
Privately.
He told her. He didn't say very much. He told my mom that he thought the aliens were going to come and pick him up.
So in what way is the ruling elite on planet Earth, or fractions within the government, involved in otherworldly intelligence from other planetary systems maybe, or in some kind of way? How are they involved with aliens or ETs?
They know a little bit, but not very much. We have ETs in the seat of government. I can't tell you who because I don't know myself. But they come in and they put themselves in various government positions to direct certain things that are going on. But as far as the President of the United States, he knows nothing. The President of the United States, if there's anything that the intelligence community hates, it's elected officials and appointed officials.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, elected officials and appointed officials. So no reason to pick on Donald Trump. He's just like everybody else. The last president to know anything of any significance was Eisenhower. The only reason Nixon knew something when he was president was because the vice president is always told what the president is told, and Nixon was the vice president under Eisenhower. Now, when Nixon was president, he had a friend, Jackie Gleason, the famous actor.
Yeah.
And Jackie Gleason lived in New York, and he was a UFO buff to the extent that he had his house built like a flying saucer.
Oh,
He had a collection of UFO books that surpassed none. One day he was playing golf with Nixon and mentioned it, and they were in Florida, and President Nixon says, well, I want to show you something. So they got the Secret Service to drive over to Homestead Aerospace, and Homestead was where underground they had some of the laboratory storage aliens. They had the cold vaults where they take alien dead bodies and they put them in there.
Real bodies.
Yeah. And anybody who's authorized gets to see it. So Nixon took Gleason to this place and showed him the real bodies. And it really changed Jackie Gleason's life. He went home. The reason we know this is his wife, second wife, was going to write a book about this, and told the day that he came home and said that he was completely changed. Person said, what happened? He said, well, let me get a drink and then I'll tell you. And told her about seeing the alien bodies. But they prevent that from ever happening again. They don't want the president relating any kinds of stuff. The way security clearances work is top secret is the lowest clearance you can get. Above that, there's 38 levels. There's 20 levels of top secret crypto labeled top secret crypto 14, 15, 16. And then above the 28 levels, there's 10 names. There's a total of 38 levels. Now, above top secret crypto 28, they start with names like Umbra, Electra, names like that. And the very top clearance being Majestic. And that's the clearance that Bob was being groomed for.
Bob
Lazar. He didn't quite make it, but he was almost up there. And every time they would raise his clearance to a different level, he'd be given more material to read. And these briefings, he said there was about 150 of them. They were in blue folders. And he would turn the pages, and the last several pages had paper clips in them, so they couldn't get to them. And then, as his clearance was being elevated, they'd undo the paper clips and let him read a couple more pages.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's pretty incredible. So that means that the president or the presidents, they actually don't know very much.
No. Top secret, there's the 28 levels of top secret crypto, and above that 10 names. The president of the United States is like top secret crypto 17 or 18. He doesn't get to know very much. And not only that, when you get a level, top secret 17, they don't tell you everything that those guys on top secret crypto 17 knows. You get to know your one little compartmentalized area, but they don't say, oh, by the way, here's all the other stuff. You just to get that know, and that's called compartmentalization, and that's what keeps us from advancing and taking advantage of talking to your co-worker and exchanging ideas. It prevents that, and that's why we don't make as much progress as we should. Now, I don't know how much progress we're making because we're not supposed to know.
But how can all of the people who have access to that kind of information, which is incredible, how can they keep it a secret?
They're given mind control. Mind control came over with the Nazis 50 years ago, and it's so incredibly advanced now that when Bob and I were caught at the test site by security, the next day his boss picked him up and said, Bob, don't go over to the airplanes today, we're going to drive somewhere. He drove him up to Creech Air Force Base, which was formerly Indian Springs Air Force Base.
Which is still there, right?
Yeah. And they took him out of his car with a gun in his ear, took him into the office, and said, now, Bob, when we gave you this clearance, it didn't mean you were supposed to take all of your friends up there and show them the flying saucer. Now, do you want to work here or not? And he was non-committal, and he told me the reason he was non-committal is the last 2 trips he made up to Groom Lake, he could remember going up the steps of the M37 at the beginning of the day, and could remember coming down the steps at the end of the day, but he couldn't remember anything else. And that's
so
how
Bob
they keep
Lazar,
it a secret.
you say, is under mind control?
Absolutely, positive, just like everybody else.
Are you?
That works up there. I don't know.
So it's like what we have seen in the movie The Manchurian Candidate, where they use trigger words and
Absolutely.
stuff.
Absolutely. Sirhan had nothing to do with killing Bobby Kennedy. It was somebody else, and there's so much evidence of that. The gun he was having, they didn't find the bullet from that gun anywhere in Kennedy. He was shot by other people.
Mm-hmm. So the same thing happened with Kennedy, also the John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy was different. There was no mind control there. He was shot by Mossad specifically because David Ben-Gurion, Prime Minister of Israel, was tired of JFK pressing for inspection of their nuclear facility at Dimona. So Ben-Gurion gave Mossad the job in the summer of '63, and it took him 5 months to put it together. They say that the CIA did it. No, they didn't do it. But they had a guy that worked for the CIA that helped grease the skids for the murder of JFK, and his name was James Jesus Angleton.
What about Lee Harvey Oswald then?
Lee Harvey Oswald is identical to Stephen Paddock. Paddock is blamed for the massacre of 58 people and killed and 500 wounded.
And Stephen Paddock, of course, as we must remind our viewers, is the man supposedly behind the mass shooting in Las Vegas a few months ago at the Mandalay Bay.
He had nothing to do with it.
So was he a patsy, under mind control? What do you think, Oswald and Paddock?
Paddock was definitely under some kind of mind control, but he was helping the FBI run guns to the ISIS. And there's, the open records show that Stephen Paddock, between September 19th of 2016 and September 19th, 2017, he bought 84 weapons and accessories. Now, this is not a gun collector. This is a guy who's in business. And since he didn't have that kind of money, obviously he was going to slide the kind of money. And the FAI has been in all kinds of shady stuff for their entire existence. And they were running some kind of gun running deal with ISIS that came apart for an unknown reason. And they had to have a patsy. And they took Stephen Paddock. I don't think he was killed because Stephen Paddock was not the body. That was not Stephen Paddock they have pictures of in that room. Stephen Paddock had a tattoo on his neck, and there's clearly no tattoo on that guy's neck. So they probably went down to the tunnels in Las Vegas and got a guy who looked like Stephen Paddock and put it up there and shot him in the mouth and said, yeah, we have all the evidence he's is Stephen Paddock.
But what was the purpose of this terrible mass shooting in Vegas?
That's up for grabs. We know that the Crown Prince Salman, who was King Solomon's son and the heir to the throne in Saudi Arabia, the Crown Prince is progressive. He wants to give women's rights. He wants to have women be able to drive. He wants women to be able to have their hair what they want and to wear what they want. And the old guard doesn't want this. They're trying to kill Prince Salman. He had the top floor of the Mandalay Bay, and the bad guys in Saudi Arabia had a whole army here of people that were going to kill Prince Salman. We had to evacuate him from the top of the Mandalay Bay, and there was 8 helicopters there. There was 5 from Maverick and 3 others. And they were up there to try and, they did exfiltrate the Crown Prince from the top of the Mandalay Bay. I've seen the radar tapes, and they take him about 5 miles each and then lose the radar signature. They obviously landed at a safe house and dropped him off there, but he's alive because we saved him. Now, I've seen the FAA radar tapes, and there's some very strange things going on. For one, is one of the helicopters was squawking the transponder code of Southwest Airlines 4117 of Boeing 737. Now, this is the first time anybody ever saw a Boeing 737 hover for 30 minutes behind the Mandalay Bay. So they had some very expertise help.
A false flag attack?
It is a government false flag, but we don't know what the problem was. Who was screwing who? Was it we think it was the FBI was running guns and using Paddock to help them, or he was their employee. And something went wrong, but we don't know the connection yet of exactly what went wrong and how the different Saudi Arabian armies were involved in it.
So there's a lot more to find out about that story.
Absolutely, positively. And on my Facebook page, I'm very critical of the Review Journal and their editorial staff morons, because they continue to say that Stephen Paddock was the killer when it's positive that he wasn't. The guy on the floor on the 32nd floor was not Stephen Paddock. Of all the videos taken on that day by all the cab drivers and everybody else, not one single muzzle flash comes from the 32nd floor. So whoever was in the 32nd floor wasn't firing a gun.
And how could he get all of those guns and ammunition up there on that floor? In the Mandalay
He only
Bay?
had 23 guns.
That's a lot.
Whoever took them up, they got to take them in colt bags, whatever. But it was just a setup.
And it took the police 72 minutes to get there. That's a lot. It's over an hour.
Yeah, it's, like I say, there's so many unanswered questions about that disaster. I don't believe that 58 people were killed. For one thing, the Clark County coroner won't sign 30 of those death certificates, and they ask him why. He says, well, I haven't seen all the evidence yet. The guy died. Where is it? Well, let's see the death certificate. that nobody died.
Right.
He's not going to sign a fake death certificate. So that's one of the unanswered questions. Sheriff Lombardo has been forced by the FBI to say that he was the lone gunman, but he was the lone gunman just like Oswald was a lone gunman. No, it didn't happen. Lombardo was pissed because he was forced by the FBI to say what he did. And all of Metro is pissed because they're being forced into this lie. And I post every day on Facebook what a bunch of morons the Las Vegas Review-Journal is for continually saying that, oh, the gunman, Stephen Paddock, who killed 58 people, it's ridiculous. He did not.
So what about Oswald, if we go back to the JFK assassination? Was he under mind control?
But Oswald wasn't under mind control. He was just a patsy.
Who was killed?
Yeah. Ruby killed him.
Jack Ruby. Yeah.
Right.
So it was just a setup, and he just got the blame for it.
Right. And the FBI did the same thing with Kennedy that they're doing with Stephen Paddock, make him the sole gunman.
Mm-hmm. How many alien or extraterrestrial or interdimensional races do you know of or have been told about?
87.
87? Yeah. That's the number. Wow, please talk.
But, that was 20 years ago, so I'm sure it's more.
Okay, but can you describe some of these races? Who are the most malevolent or benevolent, or who's the most powerful of these races, and how do they interact with Earth?
They're not malevolent or benevolent. They're ambivalent. They don't have a particular agenda. They're here to do some things with the human race. Not everybody, but occasional, things with humans. They all have different agendas. There's no way to figure out what's going on. There's no way we should try. The reptilians were here billions of years ago before man was even a glimpse in any ET's eye. They've been around forever. They may force some types of deals, but they're not responsible for what they're saying. We're the only responsible.
Where do you get that information from?
From Lou Baldwin.
Who is?
Lou Baldwin is who they call Sleeper. He's the guy I met on ATS in 2006. He grew up in Italy. His father was in the army. Since he was 5 years old, he's been picked up by E.T. and taken every place possible in the universe and giving unlimited briefings of what's going on. He's written 10 books. I've read all of them. It's extremely interesting what he knows. I talk to him every once in a while. He lives in Kansas City. And he and I have been friends since 2006. The last place he lived was on Uranus. And
on the planet?
Yeah. And it's just really interesting. You have to read his books to see all the stuff that he's interested in.
And he says that the ETs are not, or the reptilians, or whatever race is not working behind the government.
No. I mean, they influence stuff. The reptilians don't, but there's some ETs that want a different agenda on Earth, and there's no way of telling exactly what they're doing or how they're influencing. All wars on Earth have nothing to do with what we think they do. And we're not fighting cosmic communism. We're not doing the stuff that we're accused of. It's the ETs that are fighting and have all the beasts, not us. And they're using Earth-type soldiers to accomplish some kind of agenda. But it's so complex, there's no reason to try and figure it out, because we'll never figure it out.
So in some kind of way, they are involved if they are fighting a war, like an intergalactic war.
ETs are definitely involved, but not specifically reptilians. Reptilians have been around forever. They might not even, there are so many places in the universe that they are. They're not going to worry about Earth and the New World Order, which will never come about. This story about reducing the population of 8 million to 500,000 is just, or 500 million. It's just bullshit. It's not going to happen. There's some ETs that went to a lot of trouble to create the human race, and they're not going to let anybody reduce it by 7 billion people. That's ridiculous. And it's not 7 billion anyway. 25% of the humans on Earth are ET. They're aliens. And they're dressed up like humans. So there's really...
they're dressed up like humans. They shapeshift?
Shapeshift, or wear human clothes, but they look exactly like humans, but they're really aliens.
So you get your primary information about what is real and what is going on behind the governments with the ETs from Lou Baldwin?
Yeah. You'd have to read 10 of his books and read, I have thousands of pages. I have a 3-inch binder, 2 of them, each one with thousands of pages, single-spaced, of stuff that Lou has talked about on ATS and other things. It's fantastically interesting.
Okay.
He has a website called Extraterrestrial Nation. You can go that and get information on that.
All right. So can you talk a little bit about what the best proof you have or anybody has about there being aliens and ET races that interact with Earth? How do we know that for sure? Because we've always heard about it, and it's always been very popular in movies and in books, but nobody seems to have any pictures or real proof that aliens actually do exist.
We didn't develop from fish in the sea in 5 billion years, right? No, we were engineered by ETs, and they put us here. Whatever the agenda is, we don't know, but they're totally in control.
What are your thoughts whether some of these alien crafts that people see, or even the abductions, or maybe even aliens, can be military and orchestrated and organized by the military?
80% of them are.
Okay.
Well, we have the technology, and not the whole technology, but we can certainly fake abductions. And people ask me, well, suppose you wake up in a saucer, how can you tell if it's alien or if it's ET or military? I said, if you see a non-com over on a table sipping coffee, it's us.
So talk about the moon. You've been very public about what is actually going on the moon. Please talk about that. What is the moon?
The moon was manufactured on Jupiter about 38 million years ago. And during that 38 million years, it's been touring our solar system. Now, we're told by NASA that there's 7 planets. There's not. There's 40 planets in our solar system. And the moon has been touring around doing the same thing that they're doing here, and that is monitoring what's going on the specific planet. We're the lowest base form of all 40 planets. We're just, we're really the scumbags.
40 planets?
40.
How do we know that? How do you have this information?
Lou Baldwin told me.
So again, that's
we have 40 planets, and NASA only knows about maybe 12 or 15 because not all of them are visible. There's 7 kinds of matter. We only know about 4, and so there's all kinds of things that tricks are being played on. They have giant mirrors up there as big as a planet that are aimed so that we are seeing just stars in the sky, and that's hiding a planet.
Cloaked in...
cloaked.
Invisibility?
Yeah. So all these 40 planets trade with each other, actually 39 planets. All of them have moons with civilizations. All of them have planets with civilizations that live both on the surface and underground. The Earth has more than 1,000 civilizations that live inside. And
Hollow Earth.
It's not hollow. It has so many caves and openings. It's not hollow like a tennis ball, but it does have millions and millions of miles of tunnels and caves and openings in which these civilizations live. Now, some of them manifest themselves overtly, like at Shasta. You hear of the
Mount Shasta.
Yeah, you
Yes.
hear of the different people that come up there. But there's more than anybody could possibly imagine inside the Earth. Now, there's still a hot molten core, but between the molten core and the surface, there's a shitload of people.
So,
and
is there a
civilizations
central sun inside of the planet, as some people claim?
I don't know how that works.
So, when people talk about Shambhala and Agatha, which is what is mentioned to be like a civilization and a place, a city inside of the hollow earth, is that something you can relate to, or is that just a wild claim in your?
Well, I'm sure it's true. I don't know anything about it.
All right.
We're finding more and more about Antarctica and the civilization there. We know that there's a gigantic E.T. base there, and we in some way are cooperating with it or relating to it. That's why so much is going on down there. So much transportation, so many supplies, so much is going down in Antarctica, and we're just told nothing about it. It's a perfect place to hide something because we can't get there. And if we could get there, we're not going to find the openings that lead down into where the ETs are. But Linda Moulton Howe had the guy that flew the C-130 by accident over this place and saw the interior.
Mm-hmm. So what about Admiral Byrd, who talked about flying over Antarctica and entering a hole that went into the hollow earth?
He did all that, and he was silenced, asked not to talk about it, but he knew the whole thing. And after the war, as Project Paperclip was going on, Hitler came to Antarctica. He stayed there for a time. Then he moved up to Argentina, and he was there for a while. And then he died in 1968 in a hospital in the United States. But still much involved in the Nazi takeover of the United States.
So Hitler did not die in 1945 in the bunker, as people
Absolutely
think.
Not.
He was brought over by the CIA
I
to
don't
America?
know why he was not brought over. He went to Antarctica. I think he took one of his flying saucers because he was being aided by one of the ET races. And they have made it possible for his engineers to engineer a saucer, and they used it. But when he escaped, I just watched a special on TV about his escape from Germany. Pretty interesting. I don't remember all the names, but he definitely did go to Antarctica, and it probably definitely was in a saucer. Now, this program didn't say that because everybody's hesitant to talk about
Let's
saucer.
wrap up the Hitler story. So you say that Hitler went to Antarctica, and
Right.
then he went to what a lot of theories say that he went to South America.
Right,
And then
Argentina.
Argentina, okay. And then he worked with the CIA or the deep state government here
Somebody-
in America.
So somebody in America, I'm not sure whether the CIA, but the Nazis were taken over, and they certainly had control of NASA, and they certainly had control of some of the major corporations. So whether he was directly involved, I don't know. But I
But
do
they're all
know-
connected, the intelligence services, right?
Yeah.
Here. So it's all basically the same.
Right.
And it's also said that Joseph Mengele, who was a Nazi scientist and doctor who was part of the MK Ultra mind control experiments, went here to America as well as Werner.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, and Werner von Braun, he was also a Nazi scientist, wasn't he? That worked in the military here.
Yeah,
and he claimed once that the biggest threat on planet Earth was the alien takeover.
Well, that's what Rosen says.
Carol
He
Rosen.
didn't say that.
Yeah. Carol Rosen said that he confided in her and told her those things.
Maybe, but
what are your thoughts on that?
The alien takeover, they made us. What do you mean, take us over?
In what way did the aliens make us?
They designed us. They engineered us. They put things together to make the human body.
Genetic manipulation?
Yeah.
So is that the reason why we have mammalian and reptilian DNA in the sense that we have a reptilian brain?
Well, who says we have a reptilian brain?
We don't?
We're too dumb to have a reptilian brain.
You don't believe in the scientific proof that we have a reptilian brain?
No. There's people trying to constantly connect the human race with the universe. There's a movement, I think it's called the Source of One, and we're all part of the universal brain. It's all bullshit. We're just, humans here trying to make a living, trying to survive. We're not part of some galactic universe. People just make that stuff up because they want to feel that they're part of the universe. We're not. We're just dumbos here on Earth, trying to learn how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed. That's all there is.
But if you say that we are a race that have been genetically modified or created by aliens.
Created is a better
Created by aliens, then in what way can we not be part of a universal whole? Not as in a whole, but as a whole.
Why would we be? Why would we be part of a universal whole if the aliens made us?
Why did the aliens make us?
Well, they have an agenda that we have no idea. For instance, between Mars and Jupiter, there was a planet called Man, M-A-N. It was 1.5 times as big as Earth. It had 11 billion humans, just like you and me. It had fantastic achievements. While it was not a utopia, they had fantastic stuff on Man. The roadways were diamonds. The buildings were made of gold. I mean, they had everything they wanted. They had shafts through the planet that would give light from the top into interior sections in the Earth. It was really a great place. But for some reason, it didn't fit into the overall plan that the reptilians had, and they blew it up.
So the reptilians do have a plan, and then they blew up that planet.
They blew up that planet.
So is the planet Man, is that the same planet that some researchers have called Meldick?
I don't know. I don't know much about Meldick, but when they blew it up, it took 1.5 seconds to completely disintegrate. The entire planet was 1.5 times as big as Earth. Every 11 billion souls, 1.5 seconds it was gone. And that's what's been raining down on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. All that stuff raining down, gold, silver, diamonds, just planting all over. And this stuff goes to Jupiter too, or to Mars. And we call it the asteroid belt. It's the man belt. It's the remnants of the planet Man.
This sounds very much, and viewers will probably think that when they hear you say these things, it sounds very much like a famous scene from Star Wars, where the Death Star is blowing up the planet Alderaan. Is there a connection to any of that?
I don't know. Gene Roddenberry had connections to a lot of secret information. What he used specifically, I was never a Star Wars fan, so I haven't seen all that stuff.
You talked about the moon landing being faked in 1969.
Right.
A lot of researchers claim that the film director Stanley Kubrick was behind that, the filming of that particular moon landing, what we saw on television.
Absolutely. He was asked, he was actually demanded by President Nixon to fake it. They brought him to the White House, and President Nixon said, "We got a problem. People think we're going to the moon, and we can't do it because of the Van Allen belt. Can you help us?" Well, what do you want me to do? We want you, like you made the year 2001, we want you to fake the moon landings. So he did. And the plan was to kill him after he made the fake landings, because they didn't want anybody to know about it. They wanted to keep it with, 2 or 3 per, 10 or 15 people that knew, and he wasn't one of them. They wanted to kill him. But what he did is after he did the fake moon landings, he stayed in his house so they couldn't get to him. The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut were the only ones that he made definite reference to faking the moon landing.
Yeah.
So he may have made those others, but
Yeah.
the other ones he put it to and said, "I did this." Today, they want people to believe that they went to the moon. And so they're doing every possible thing. I'm trying to think of what happened in the last couple of weeks that I've seen this, that this is directed by somebody who has a reason for people to want to believe that we still went to the moon. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. There's no possible way that we could have done it.
How is Area 51 connected to all of what you're saying? What is really going on there? How many levels are there underground? As a lot of people, they talk about there are many levels underground, and things are going on there, and what is in fact going on there?
Well, first of all, people's attention is focused to Area 51 because I found it. And even George Knapp says it hadn't been for John Lear, we'd have never known about it. And it's a little complex story of how I found out about it. But in 1988, I was the head of MUFON section in Nevada, and we held a conference here. And I was told to select 4 speakers, which I did. And they said, "No, we don't want those speakers. We want these speakers." So it was at the one of the hotels. I'm trying to remember the Aladdin Hotel. And all I did was I had rented part of the theaters or areas for the symposium, and gave that for the 4 speakers that MUFON wanted. And then I had one for my speakers, and I had Bill English, Clifford Stone, I think Bill Cooper. I think I had 4 speakers, and of course ours was the one that was attended by thousands of people, and only a few people went to the MUFON conference. So actually I think I was removed as state director, no longer needed. But it was at that conference that I talked about Area 51, and that's when it first came out. And Area 51 was from a geographical reference that the state of Nevada had for southern Nevada. And it had nothing to do with space or secrecy or anything. It just happened to fall in that section. And in the past few years, they talk about an Area 52. That's bullshit. There is no Area 52, but they're trying to make one. Area 52 is the Tonopah Test Range. And the Tonopah Test Range has always been Tonopah Test Range, but now for some reason they're calling it Area 52. So Area 51, Groom Lake, was found by a couple of Lockheed test pilots. I think it was Tony LeVere and Fish Salmon who originally found it, proposed it to Kelly Johnson. They took it over and started building or testing the U-2 there. But the real history of Groom Lake starts back in 1942 when the Navy built a cross runway up there to train their pilots out in the desert. And that cross runway you can still see it's just faint there, but you can still see it. In 1942, after the end of the war, they left, didn't do anything. Then in 1948, they sent the Seabees up there, and it's always been controlled by the Navy. They sent the Seabees up there, and the Seabees made the original underground, all the underground areas. They have all the different levels. And they left it after they built it, and it was occupied by something or someone, and by sheer accident, Tony Lear and Fish Savin picked the area that was right above where they built all this underground levels. And in 1993, I had a friend of mine flying the F-117A, and they used to go over to Groom Lake all the time, and the original runway caved in the underground facilities, and they had to rebuild it. And that's why they built the new runway to the east of it, because that thing had caved in. And he told me the F-117A had to use just the space before it or after it for their operations. How many levels there are, I don't know. It must be at least 15, and it doesn't matter. It's operated by ETs. There's got to be at least 8 different ETs that work up there. I always tell the story of the security guard that was put to work in a certain corridor, and one day this praying mantis or whatever it was comes walking down the hallway, and the guy died of a heart attack because they'd never seen that kind of and he was never briefed on it. But now they brief him, and they do it carefully by just flashing a picture every once in a while and getting them used to it. But of the 99% of the people that work at Area 51 don't know anything that's going on there. They only know their specific job. As soon as if they say that, you work at Area 51, you see any flying saucers? No, they don't even know that exists. It's in a completely different area, and they're not authorized to know any of that anyway. I just wrote a page or two on what it's like to work at Area 51. You should read it on my Facebook page, but it's not a nice place to work. You're followed 24/7. You're followed at work, you're followed at home, you're not allowed to talk about anybody, you're not allowed, even with your associates, you can't talk about anything you do up there. It's all compartmentalized. When you walk anywhere in Area 51, you have to wear these goggles that only let you see 25 feet ahead, and you can see nothing to the left or the right or above, and you have to wear these things the whole time when you're going anywhere up there. It's an oppressive place to work. You're given lie detector tests every 90 days. They wouldn't let you resign. People that go through all this thinking, man, it's going to be so cool, I'm going to find out the secrets of the universe. They don't get to know nothing. And up until 20 years ago, the first question on every 90-day lie detector test was, do you know John Lear, and what's your relationship with John Lear?
Did they ask that?
They asked that, not only in Groom Lake, but at Tonopah Test Trains, at Los Alamos, at Livermore. The thing was, do you know John Lear, and what's your relationship? And when Bob Lazar was asked this question, he had 3 interviews before they let him go up there. And during the second interview, they were all scientific interviews. They said, do you know John Lear, and what's your name? Yes, I know him. What do you think about him? Bob says, I told him he sticks his nose into places where it shouldn't belong. What I didn't tell them was, I also like to stick my nose into places that doesn't belong.
Why do you think that you've become that important, and why do you think they actually talk about you? Why is that something they even need to go into?
Because I come up with stuff that's real, and they find out it's real, and they don't know how I did it, and I don't know how I did it. I stumble into stuff by accident, and it turns out to be real, and I really don't know where it comes from. I don't care whether anybody believes. I'm certainly not making any money on it. And I'm certainly open to a lot of criticism, but
most of the researchers are all being criticized or ridiculed or being not believed or...
yeah, because they want their particular story to be right, you know, and they don't want to hear anybody who disagrees with it. I don't care whether anybody believes my story. I don't try to force it on anybody. If you want to know what I think, you know, I'm happy to tell you, but I don't make anybody believe that stuff. I don't make any money. I don't make any appearances. I have no axe to grind.
So when people are hearing this and listening, watching this interview, the general, ordinary person with a day-to-day life, when they're hearing these extraordinary claims and these extraordinary wild stories, maybe they'll be overwhelmed with fear. What do you suggest people should do when they hear these things, and what do you think is the best message positively that you can give to people?
The best message is live your life with integrity, without envy, without hate, without fear, and express your love to your family each and every day. That's all you have to do. You don't have to make money, you don't have to head a corporation, you don't have to chase women, none of that stuff. The only thing is live your life with integrity, without envy, hate, or fear, and express your love to your family each and every day.
John Lear, it's been mind-blowing, it's been extraordinary, it's been quite incredible, and it's been very exciting to visit your incredible house here with a life lived and extraordinary experiences. And thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you
for coming by.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.